Hello, I'm Bernard Keevy. Welcome to 7 Steps to Build a Business You Can Sell If You Want. Today's agenda. You need to understand the whole picture with your business. So it's been likened to a 6-cylinder engine, and this was a concept pioneered by a colleague of mine, Frank Momolo, who's a coach based in New York. Of those 6 cylinders, you need to have strategies, written strategies in place covering 90 days, a year and 3 years, and these strategies need to be constantly updated. You need to set time aside to implement those strategies, which we'll come on to. You need to concentrate on the 20% of activities that will get you 80% of your results, which is the 5-step profit formula. You need to understand that your business's finances, which is again another one of the 6 cylinders in your business. You need to understand what's meant by the term strategic sales and marketing, which is another of your cylinders. And you need to have systems in place so that your business operates and makes profits even if you're not part of it, because then you can sell it. So ask yourself, are you running on all 6 cylinders? Do you have these written strategies in place? Do you understand things like break-even point and the difference between cash flow and profit? Have you streamlined and rationalized your operations as much as you could? Do you understand that very few, less than 3% of buyers, potential buyers, are now buyers, and therefore you should be marketing to the whole market, not just the now buyers? Do you have people in vital positions, or do you outsource vital functions? So in other words, things that could be done by other people for less than you want to earn per hour, do you actually have other people doing them? And do you have systems in place, which means that if you go on holiday, or if you're ill, or if you want to sell your business, the business will operate even if you're not there. This was put on Facebook recently by Brian Tracy, and I think it says it all really. So everything starts with positive thoughts in your head. The only thing that's missing here is when you decide exactly what you want, it should be then written down. And obviously it should be time-based, and you should take action every day, and you should keep going until you succeed. That doesn't mean you can't change. It doesn't mean you can't alter and make corrections along the way, but you don't give up basically. Now, anyone who's read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey will have seen the difference between urgence and importance. Now, urgency basically means something has a deadline, whereas importance obviously means that it needs to be done to grow and develop your business and yourself. So what tends to happen is that people work through all the things that have got a deadline in order of importance, which is good, but they don't work through the things that haven't got a deadline. And some of the most important things you need to do in your business are the things that haven't got a deadline. So it's things like working on your own skills and qualifications. Brian Tracy reckons that human knowledge and skills are doubling every 10 years. So if you're not doing the same, then you're falling behind. So self-improvement, developing your own skills, and also implementing all these strategies within your business that we're going to look at today. 60 to 90 minutes a day has been recommended by various people, including people like Nigel Botterill of the Entrepreneur Circle. Up to you how much time you can find, but it's again been estimated that for every minute you spend in what's called box 2 here, which is working on your business, planning and organising, for every minute you spend there, you save yourself 10 in terms of trial and error and execution. So it'll only happen, however, if it's in your diary, because otherwise what happens is all the things you have to do that have got a deadline take over. Now these things that we're looking at that you need to diarise, they've been likened to big rocks, and your times in your week is a jar. And effectively what happens is if all the urgent things with a deadline get done first, then that doesn't leave room for the big rocks. So you need to have the big rocks in place first, and then find room to put in all the stones and the sand, which are these things with a deadline. Now, just to show you how important the 5-step profit formula is, these are the 20% of activities which will generate 80% of your results. And they are how many leads you generate and what proportion you convert, which will tell you your number of customers, how often each of them buys and how much they spend each time, which will tell you your total turnover or revenue, and then what your gross profit margin is, which will give you your gross profit. Now the thing is, you've only got to make small increases in each of those 5 key variables, and you can make a huge difference to your profits. So if you just made 10% increases, for example, in each of the 5, this is what happens. You'll see that your gross profit is almost doubled just by making 10% increases. Now 10% over a course of a year, if you're spending an hour a day making these improvements in 5 key areas, 10% is extremely feasible for any business owner. But why stop there? Why not look at a more realistic rate, which is towards 50%? And the thing about getting towards 50% improvements, in the highlighted red areas, the key areas, the thing about 50% increases is you've absolutely transformed any business. Now think about this, 50% is only 1% a week. So if you were spending an hour or more a day working on your business and concentrating on just 5 key areas, well, that would be an hour a week on each of the 5, and all you're looking to do is to make a 1% increase in each of those 5 in the course of that hour each week and over the weeks. You might not get the full 50% for all of them in a year, but the nearer you get to it, you can see how much you can transform any business. And no one says you have to stop after a year, of course, you can keep going. So you can see that these 5 key areas, if you devote time to actually work on them, can totally transform any business. So let's look at our finance module, and I mentioned earlier about the break-even point. So the way break-even point works is you have fixed costs or overheads which you have to cover, and basically they're going to cost you money whether or not you actually sell anything. So they're called your fixed costs or fixed overheads. You've also got variable costs, which are costs that you incur every time you make, produce and sell something. So that would be things like commission costs, overtime costs, license fees, materials, etc., components. Your fixed overheads, by the way, they would be things like business rates, mortgage costs, wages and salaries that are fixed in the short term because you've got to pay people whether you're making anything for sale or not. And then you've got the third thing here, which is your sales income or your total revenue, which basically means if you sell 10 items, you get 10 times your price in, and if you sell 100 items, you get 100 times your price in. So this is proportional to how much you sell. So let's see how that works. So let's just say that you had a business where your fixed overheads were £50,000 a year. Your variable cost for everything you produce is £10 per unit, and you sell it for £20 per unit. There's a formula for working out your break-even point. The formula is if you divide your fixed costs here by the difference between what it costs you to produce each thing compared to how much you sell it for. If you divide the fixed costs by that thing called contribution, that will tell you that you have to sell 5,000 units to break even. Because what's happening is every time you sell a unit, you're making £10 little bit of profit here to pay towards the 50,000 fixed overheads. And by the time you've made 5,000 of them, 5,000 times £10 will give you your £50,000. Now we can show this on a diagram. So this is called a break-even chart. And what we've done is we've drawn out, here's pounds up here and here's output and sales along here. And what we've said is we've started with our fixed costs here of 50,000. We're starting with our variable costs of naught if we don't make anything. And as we produce things for sale, those go up in proportion here. And if we add those two costs together, we get this green line, which is our total cost. Now, we also sell for £20 a unit. So if we don't sell any, it starts at £0. And every time we sell one, that goes up at the rate of £20 a unit. And what happens is eventually the total sales or total revenue will overtake the total costs. Up to there, you're making a loss. And then this triangle here represents that you're now making a profit. But the thing is, if you can alter your total costs by reducing them, both fixed and variable, and if you can increase your sales revenue by being able to increase your prices because you improve your product in some way or because you market it better, then what actually happens is that instead of the break-even point being where it was, which was at this level of output, you can actually make it a lot lower. And therefore that means that at the previous output where you were just breaking even, you're now making a substantial profit. So you can see that making small differences to 3 key variables, your price, your fixed costs and your variable costs, can have a substantial impact on any business. Now let's look at another thing that's important to understand, and that is how much you can charge for your product. Now in simple terms, anyone who's done any economics will recognize this. In simple terms, the more you charge for what you sell, the likelihood is that you won't be able to sell as much of it. That's not always the case, by the way, but generally this is the case. And as you charge a lesser price, you would expect to be able to sell more. The trouble is, though, you don't know. All you know is where you are now. So you don't know what your demand looks like. And there's no way really of measuring it other than charging every different possible price and seeing how much you sell. you can't rely on what market research tells you, because people will probably tell you that they wouldn't buy your product if you put your prices up, but that might not be the case. So, but if you did know, it would look something like this. Unfortunately, it could look like this, which basically means that if you put your prices up slightly, you would lose a proportionate amount, a large proportionate amount of business. And that's called elastic demand. And the trouble here is, this is very typical when people are competing on price, because what happens is, if you put your prices up slightly and that's all you're competing on, you become more expensive than your competitors, so you lose a lot of business to them. So then you say to yourself, okay, well, what I'll do then is I'll lower my prices and capture a lot of business from them. But the trouble is, you can't, because what tends to happen in this sort of situation is that everyone's driven prices down anyway to more or less as low as you can get, because you're all competing on price. So everyone's been lowering their prices to try and, capture share. And you end up with everyone being on very low margins. So if you did lower your price, then you might get more business, but you'd be making a loss, so you just can't do it. And the other problem is, if you lower your price, then all your competitors will probably do the same as well, and then you're all worse off than you are now. So it's a real dilemma, and the only way out of that dilemma where you're competing on price is to do this, and to make your demand curve for your product look like this. And now that's called inelastic demand, and what that means is, if you put your prices up here, you'll only lose a slight amount of business, and also what it means is that for any level of price, well, basically you can charge a much higher price at every level of sales. But you can only do this if you can get the message out to the marketplace that there's something better about what you sell compared to the competitors, so that they're all competing down here on price, but you're up here. And that's why you need to have something that's different, that's unique about what you sell, but also that's unique and appeals to your ideal customers' hot button. So how do you do that? Well, here are 8 strategies that work for 95% of businesses. So if in your hour a day every week all you did was concentrated on one at a time implementing these 8 strategies over the course of the year, then this is how you would get your 50% increases that we talked about, and this is how you would get your demand for what you sell to increase in the way we showed, so that you can charge higher prices and you could put your prices up without losing business to your competitors. So these 8 strategies work for any business. So there's a proper way to do advertising, which very few people understand. There's a very powerful way of building a business through joint ventures. You can have extra options for sale when you sell things, so you can sell larger portions or extra products, and that's called an upsell or a cross-sell. And the classic example that always given is McDonald's, where, do you want fries with that? Do you want to go large? So the fries is a cross-sell and the go large is an upsell. You could have a wider range of products by having joint venture partnerships, or by just making people aware of what you actually sell, because a lot of businesses, their customers don't know all the things they do. You could have a downsell option, which basically means you'll convert more business. So what that means is, if someone can't afford to pay you your full rate for your full service offering, then you have a reduced offering, which is less value and a lower price, but that can get them to come in, and then once they're in, you've got a chance to upsell them later. You can do what's called a drip campaign, which I'll show you later. You can offer added value here rather than reduce prices, because typically if you reduce your prices by, say, 10%, you'll often see something like 25-30% reduction in profit. So reducing prices through discounting is an expensive way to buy business. And also these days it's been estimated that unless you discount by about 40%, it doesn't really have much impact anyway, so it becomes even more expensive. And you could work on your margins and your costs to increase your profit margin, which will increase your profits. So you wouldn't have to implement all of these strategies at once. Just one at a time over the course of a year would achieve the 50% increases we were looking at earlier. So let's look at the difference between strategic and tactical marketing. Now you need to understand that what happens is, at any given time, there's a whole marketplace out there of potential buyers, but only about 1 to 3% of them are ready to buy now. The other 97 to 99% are potentially future buyers. 30% of them typically will never buy, but 70% of them will at some stage probably buy. But the question is that you need to nurture them along here, because by the time they get to be now buyers, they'll have already been nurtured by someone that they're going to buy from, and that needs to be you. So what they're looking for is information. So they're looking as to why would they need this product, why would they not want it, i.e. objections, how can they overcome those? And then when they've decided that they would want the product, who would they buy from? And that then becomes choice of vendor. And as I say, they're looking for information. So if you can supply them with information without trying to sell to them, then by the time they become now buyers, you're the person they'll buy from. So they're looking for evidence really as to why they should buy the product and why they should buy it from you. So the thing about doing that properly is that 80% of all sales need multiple points of contact, and 80% of sellers give up far too early by about the second, third attempt typically. So if you're the person, the business that nurtures the prospect along the buyer's journey by supplying them with information, then you'll be amongst the 20% at the end who get 80% of the business. So let's look at how we actually convert people to give us their details so that they will then, we'll be in a position then to give them the information they're looking for. So this is called conversion of leads. And the way it works is you have to follow a formula called the conversion equation. And the first thing you have to do, so this is if this was a flyer or an advert or something that you're saying, the first thing you have to say is to grab attention from your ideal customer, ideal prospect. And your ideal prospect, you could have more than one of them, but you need to do this separately for each. Now, they will have an issue, problem or concern on their mind that they haven't got a solution to. So your first thing that they see from you should be something that grabs their attention by saying, I know you've got this issue, problem or concern. And then you should engage with them by saying, and what's more, I can give you a solution. So here's your issue, problem or concern. That's called an interrupt. Here's my solution, which is called an engage. And then there's an educate, which basically convinces them that you can actually solve this problem or issue or concern for them by, telling them exactly how it works and being as specific as possible and giving evidence of other people for whom it has worked. And then you have a risk-free offer. Now, a risk-free offer, if it was to a now buyer, a risk-free offer might be something like a cast iron guarantee or a free trial. If it's to a future buyer, a risk-free offer would be something like an ideas guide, an information pack, a checklist, something that gives them the information they're looking for and enables them to make the buyer's decision, but you're not trying to sell to them. Something like phone now for an appointment is a high risk offer because that means that someone's going to try and sell them something, and if they're not ready to buy, then they won't go for that. So here we can show you how this works. So here is a typical website, and this was a child psychologist, and you can see that this child psychologist said that he specializes in all these different things, and there's all these different areas along here that people can go into the website and have a look. And the trouble is, it's not specific enough. And there's a high risk offer as well. Phone now for a free consultation. Well, that means phone now so I can try and sell you something. So first of all, there's no market dominating position, because if you haven't identified a clearly defined ideal target client or customer, then you can't have a market dominating position. You can't convince them that you're the specialist or expert that will solve this problem for them better than anyone else, because you're coming across here, your message is, I do all things for all different people. So now we look at the conversion equation. So now what we say is we'll home in on just one of those areas, and we'll say, are you sick and tired of the yelling, screaming and belligerent attitude of your child? That's the interrupt. And then you say, now you can discover the secrets to controlling your child and instantly restore peace and quiet in your home. That is the engage. Then we have here the educate, and the educate basically then explains how it all operates. This is a video. It could be a copy, it could be what you say in your main body of when you're speaking, but basically this is the educate. And the educate then will always set up the risk-free offer. And the risk-free offer here is compelling, and it says you can learn the secrets to gaining and maintaining complete control of your child in less than 60 seconds. All you need to do is let me know your first name and email address, and I will send you this free information. And that's called a low threshold or low resistance offer because it's risk-free. Now this follows a strategic marketing approach because you're providing information. You're not trying to sell to someone who might not yet be a now buyer. This way you'll get a high number of prospects opting into your risk-free offer because it's compelling, it's informational, and as you say, there's no risk involved. And this is where the multiple points of contact then kick in, because you can now launch what's called a drip campaign. And a drip campaign simply says that what you now do is you supply this prospect with future pieces of information at regular intervals so as to help them make their buying decision as to whether they're going to buy eventually or not. And typically the information you'd supply on the drip campaign would just be further in-depth information concerning some of the ideas in the initial thing you sent them. So you might go into further detail about some of those points. And the result is you'll end up with a lot more, in this case, a lot more consultations with the doctor. So if we compare both sites, I think you'd agree that the second one is far more likely to get people to click and take advantage of the offer than the first site is. And this is true of any piece of advertising, marketing, flyer, any sort of marketing piece at all. This approach will always work better than the general approach that basically says I'm, all things to all people. If you found that useful, and if you'd like more information about what the 3 biggest lead generation mistakes are that small business owners make, there's a free video, you can get a free download, a free report. Then go to exponentialgrowth4u.com with the number 4 and the letter U, or email me on info@exponentialgrowth4u.com. I've got loads of free resources that I might be able to let you have, such as an ad template, a landing page template for a website, etc. So, if you want more information, just contact me and I'll let you have it. And thank you very much for listening.